G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day wherever you are watching from. Now today we actually have a lot to go over. Of course we're going to look at the maps, then we're going to look at Ukraine sinking a Russian warship and why this is important. We're going to then look at what has been issued as a serious national security threat from the Biden administration about Russia. Then we're going to look over some footage. We're going to specifically look in Avdiivka, talk about Putin and Biden and some comments from Putin as well. But firstly, we have to start and talk about the situation inside of Avdiivka. So we'll go to the maps straight off the bat. Of course, this is Ukraine in the center and the capital of Kyiv. The red areas, of course, have been occupied since Russia's 2022 invasion on Ukraine, and the purple since 2014. So now 10 years ago, of course, this being Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. So Russia occupy the whole of Crimea, and they are looking to expand their control outside of Donetsk. This is why areas like Vuhledar, Avdiivka, and Avdiivka here, of course, where we're talking about now, are incredibly important for both Russia, but as well for Ukraine to maintain that control over where this can then go once Russia was to shorten that front line. So what we talked about yesterday was, of course, this road through here being cut off by the Russians. Now, Russia has managed today to extend its control now well past that. So let's go back to the 13th and then the 14th, and then this should look at the 15th. Of course, in Australia, it is the 15th, but I think my laptop on here is set to the US time, but this is the most recent map update. So in the north, of course, we have seen this Russian extension beyond this road, now some, let's say, 600 meters. And the most important measurement is from wherever the forces are here down to this road. So saying 1.3 maybe kilometers. We'll talk about the south in a second, but let's say that these two maps, of course, this is the Syriac, is lining up fairly closely. Now, I did see some people suggest, why did Russia move then on this axis? Let me get these up. The axis to here, rather than straight down where it is a shorter length to this road. What they're looking to do is get some level of cover in this tree line and continue the push down here. From what I'm seeing is to get into this tree line, and I think this lines up better here. So we're looking down like this way, down this arrow way. I don't know why I'm pointing at my laptop, but then we talked about that there could have been a way down and through here for Ukraine to move equipment, although on a soiled road. So this currently is cut off, but is moving into that tree line, and we will see possibly more of a move to try and get down into here. But that is a very important move. Now, I put up yesterday, just I can overlay the video, that this is very, very flat here. Very flat, very open ground. Now, I think a lot of people aren't too familiar with weapon systems and ranges. Even just like your normal 50 cal machine gun, your 12.7 mil, that has a range of really at 2Ks off like a tripod, much further if then you do like extended range C2 sight. But and then elevated weapons, you're talking on a BMP, BTR, anything like that, well beyond that. So the amount of fire that I could actually see getting crossed from here across is a hell of a lot, even by just a belt-fed machine gun in like your normal troop outline. Like I myself on a Mag 58, which the Americans call, it's not a SAW, it's your bigger one, the GPMG for the Brits, but your 7.62 machine gun. I'll put up whatever the Yanks call it here, the 240 maybe. I've shot that myself at 1,400 meters. So these areas are well within range, and that's why I do question how open these roads in and out are for, both movements in the day and at nighttime, especially with the amount of drones that will be operating in this area. So we will see. We've also seen, of course, mortars land around here in the coke plant. So this area is, at the moment really falling out of control. And it will be interesting to see where this goes as this does close up. And if we go from Russian line to Russian line, we're talking 4 kilometers, not far, and grey zone to grey zone. And this is the Ukrainian sources map. Like this map is the Ukrainian source map. So this is conservative towards Russian gains. These are then at 3 kilometers. So really squeezing down onto here. And this situation, look, we don't know what is exactly happening on the ground, but I can tell you that this is not this is not a good sign. Like all the signs are pointing that this is going badly quickly. Now, we'll get into the maps and we'll see what exactly is happening up in the north here. And we have then of this map update on both the north and the south, but we'll do this slightly differently to each other. So look, I think these two maps, realistically, they line up. That is incredibly close to my eye. Now, from the northern axis, the Russian army took control over the forest belt between Avdiivka coke plant and water treatment facilities up here. So they've split those two in here, which can be a big problem of getting people, arms, whatever, between the two. In addition, troops crossed the industrial avenue and begun advancing in the forest belt southwest of it. So in these forest belt, we're talking the tree lines, 1.4 kilometers from the latest supply route of the Ukrainian army to the city and 3.8 kilometers from the Russian troops on the southern front. Ukrainian forces began the withdrawal from the landfill of Avdiivka Quarry and Verba Summer Cottage Society. So, see this reservoir up in this landfill area, and we can just have a quick squiz across. Oh, I'm not good at controlling this thing yet, but that he's saying that Ukraine has started withdrawing from these areas out in here. Now, then we're going to have a look down in the south, and we do see that this has got worse again, and Russia has pushed up into this tree line where these cross between the fields here and have further significantly closed this gap. So we're talking 750 meters between red to red. Again, this is on the deep state Ukrainian sources, and 300 meters between grey zone to grey zone. So, of course, we're talking is down right in here. So if I zoom up, you can see better. You can see this intersection just to show that we're actually in the right spot. And this is looking fairly similar. Of course, this is very flat, and that Russia has pushed out down to this tree line. Now, personally, I do not see how, if you're in here and there is just some level of machine gun sitting that is down here or across here, I don't see how anything can move across this open ground. I do not know. Now, if there are Ukrainian troops in this area, I think they are in a really, really precarious, bad situation currently. That said, there may not be troops down in here, but I think if there wasn't, we would see then this close up. What Ukraine would need to do is try and reduce these flanks any way they can to get back if there are guys in here. So, of course, this situation is developing, and that's what we see on the map of those two like pincers there, working as a perfect pincer maneuver there. Now, let's look at what Syriac firstly shows. So, he's showing pretty much the exact same moving up to where this creek line runs through, and then the crossing of these fields and into this area. So basically the exact same. That's what we like. What it does show, is just on the other side of this, it does show that Russia has sort of launched a second pincer through where we see this area and then this area here. And we don't see that movement on the deep state map. Let's have a look. On the southern axis, or from the southern axis, Russian army took control over new positions northwest of Opitny, thus reducing the bottleneck around the former air defense missile battalion. Moreover, Russian forces entered Lizna and Kolosava streets, taking control over a series of trenches in the southern forest, which was vacated by Ukrainian troops to avoid encirclement. So, talking on these streets as vacated then the forest. So I've just had a bit of a zoom in here, and we do see, if we just zoom in one more, it is where he is talking about. So that Ukraine has vacated. This is Lizova Street, which will be Lizna, and Kolosava will then be this Korova Street, I believe. Syriac is Spanish, translates from Russian to English, though there is a problem there. Sometimes it is slightly different depending if you go Ukraine to English, Russian to English, it can be slightly different, but we believe that Ukraine has vacated areas within here, at least according to my interpretation of what then Syriac is saying. So, Avdiivka at the moment, it is really crushing down on that spot. Now, I've got a little bit of footage. I can't really show you this, but it is translated, and it will be in the Telegram if you'd like to come and join the rage and everyone yelling at each other and yelling at me in here. But then we see Russian soldiers operating inside Bakhmut, you can see little bits and pieces of running some fairly good gear, and some people have said that the Chechens are working in this area as well. Can't show you the footage because we're on YouTube, of course. But that is basically the situation that is happening in Avdiivka. And yeah, let's go to the next breaking news. We'll talk about the maps more a little bit later on. We'll do the full map update. See my audience retention on YouTube. YouTube must be loving me. But the next one we're going to look in is I've just named the folder Space. Anyway, the head of the House of Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner, has issued this statement, which has gone viral across Twitter with 8.4 million impressions. Now, something I do want to point out, on Twitter, this is impressions. This is not the same as YouTube views. So when you see like Tucker Putin interviews, 220 million impressions, that doesn't mean views. YouTube's difference. Anyway, he says, today, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence has made available to all members of Congress information concerning a serious national security threat. I am requesting that President Biden declassify all information relating to this threat so that Congress, the administration, and our allies can openly discuss the actions necessary to respond to this threat. So there will be a meeting about this tomorrow, and we'll get more information exactly what is going. But the running theory, the running idea is that Russia launched classified nuclear stuff on its Soyuz 2 rocket into space, either anti-satellite, space to ground launch. We're not exactly sure actually what has gone up in the Soyuz 2 rocket. It might have just been some billionaire meeting his bloody green targets for the year. But let's actually have a look over now all of this and little bits and pieces that have happened like this before. And this is Putin today. Anyway, we'll call space laser number one. ABC News, New York Times, cited unnamed sources as saying the security threat Turner was referring to, that's what we read, involved Russia's potential deployment of a nuclear anti-satellite weapon into space. Now, of course, this would be against the treaties signed in 1967 and will go across this. Now, it's not clear whether the new intelligence alert is connected to the Russian launch on Feb 9 of a Soyuz rocket going in, carrying what they call a classified defense ministry payload. Now, Russia has been conducting several experiments with maneuvering satellites that might be designed to sabotage other satellites. This is director of the Nuclear Information Project for Federation of American Scientists. Now, he does say, the issue is not so much about increased nuclear weapons threat per se, but that it would increase the threat against other countries. Space-based nuclear command and control assets. It would be highly destabilizing. Pavel Podrig, an expert in Russian nuclear forces, has said, I am very skeptical, to put it mildly. Unfortunately, it's impossible to categorically rule out anything these days, but still, I don't think it's plausible. And they go over the reasons for this. Christensen talks about the weapons in space breaking the non-proliferation treaty, and we'll talk about this. And then this bloke from the Arms Control Association said that a nuclear satellite weapon made little practical sense, saying you don't need a nuclear weapon to blow up a satellite in orbit. All objects in space are so delicate. Of course, you're in zero gravity, zero wind resistance, incredibly delicate, that you can do something with much less than a nuclear detonation. Plus, it's completely illegal. House Speaker Mike Johnson, of course, Speaker of the House, and the one where a lot of this Ukraine funding really falls in his hands, said there was no need for panic over the alleged unnamed threat, but he was not allowed to discuss classified information. We just want to assure everybody steady hands are at the wheel. We're working on it, and there's no need for alarm. So let's look at that non-proliferation treaty right here. So this is the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. Now, this has a lot of shit for free for exploration, all this other shit. But in here we have, states shall not place nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction in orbit or on celestial bodies or station them in outer space in any other manner. So you can't have them up in there. Of course, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, get about this. They go straight up, they go into orbit and then straight back down. But they're not permanently placed in orbit. Now, the way around this was an old Pentagon file, which has been pulled up. Now, this doesn't exist as far as we know, but they call this the Rod of God. Now, these are 9-ton tungsten rods, and this is a kinetic weapon that it would pick up to Mark 10, striking the ground with the same force as a nuclear weapon. Of course, no fallout and very good at then hitting bunkers hundreds of feet, potentially beneath the earth. Now, what Daryl Kimball here is saying that you don't need a nuclear weapon. This falls into the same as what is called Kessler syndrome. So colossal cascading. Each collision generates space debris that increase the likelihood of further collisions. Now, this is a real threat with all the space junk and what we have in space is, of course, nothing slows down. Everything's sitting around in orbit at tens of thousands of kilometers an hour. Orbit is incredibly quick. That if one thing hits another, you start then this cascade of one thing breaks into two, and then those hit two other things and become four, and then it just goes on from there. And eventually we're locked on Earth because nothing actually put into orbit. That this is a real threat. And he's sort of talking about that. Things are very delicate in space, and you don't need that much to actually take something out. A bolt flying at bloody 20,000 k's an hour will go straight through something. You don't then need a nuclear weapon. But here we have then this. My sources say that Russian anti-satellite weapons capability designed to destroy or degrade US and allied satellite constellations. Radiation produced by a nuclear explosion would likely cause widespread disruption to these constellations. From Lieutenant Colonel Robert Vincent, most satellites with a line of sight to the nuclear detonation will be destroyed from the resulting X-rays. Military space capabilities for command and control along with reconnaissance assets may still function for a period following the detonation, but the economic collapse of degraded informational space products will be immediate. So your phone won't work at the absolute bottom level. That has a massive impact then on your economy. And of course, it's much larger than just you not being able to Snapchat a bloody dick pic. Continuing, the intent is to blind an adversary's command and control apparatus, communications, and weapons targeting capabilities in war. The more and more technologically advanced we get, the more and more we are reliant on everything from GPS, satellite communications, satellite imagery. We become very, very reliant on that. If that was wiped out, very difficult. Modern soldiers and vehicles and planes, they're incredibly reliant on SATCOMs, GPS. They can operate without them, of course, but at the end of the day, still reliant on it, and it would slow a lot down very, very quickly. And what I have is number 6 here. It sort of just goes on from that. The chain relies heavily on satellites for both Soviet and Russian contemporary war planning, centers heavily on high-risk decapitation, strikes against adversaries' leadership, but also against critical infrastructure, and we have the same here. Now, there are a lot of accounts suggesting that the convenient timing of this really aligns well with the House of Representatives potentially delaying further funding to Ukraine. People saying it is dead in the water, and that they're saying this is a strategy to scare the public into committing more money to Ukraine. And people have been sharing that with then this from President Biden only 8 hours ago, so a few hours after this broke. For those Republicans in Congress who think they can oppose funding for Ukraine and not be held to account, history is watching. And people saying, is this, a threat to move on from there? And people saying that this is, a strategy for more money. Another thing they're pointing at is Mike Turner, who, broke this publicly in this today. He was in Ukraine only, 5 days ago, meeting with Kyiv about the funding bill. I led a bipartisan Codel to Kyiv, where we met with President Zelensky and senior Ukrainian officials on Feb 10th, 2024. So that's where that all then really links into this. Is Russia breaking any rules here? If it's something like a kinetic weapon like this that the US has looked at potentially doing, may have. If it's a kinetic weapon like this, to my reading, this would be, fine. But we don't exactly know. We have no idea yet what Russia has actually launched up into space. Now, the best way to see if America is actually going to respond to any of this is look at where officials sit and look at what stocks they are buying. And if they're just buying up certain ones in nuclear countermeasures, then we get a pretty good idea, even before the classified material is given to the public, that's what Russia is then putting up into space. Now, let me get rid of that one. Moving on, Ukraine has sunk a Rapucha-class landing ship in the Black Sea using its Magora V5 sea drones, which have been very successful in the past. Now, this ship was named after Soviet commando officer Cesar Kunikov, who was killed on Feb 14th, 1945 in World War II. And this ship was sunk Feb 14th, 2024. So a bit of a bleak reality there. So let's have a look over the footage of what is happening here. And this footage is no different. We just have the Group 13, who are the special operators who are then running this. This footage is no different to what we've seen these strikes before. Ships going through the water, fairly choppy up and down. These ships have the little drones have a hell of a lot. Bloody Mossad's coming to get me or some shit. Helicopter overhead. Well, one of the other agencies I apparently work for. Anyway, highly mobile in the water, because they use a lot of like jet ski parts as well and are not very big. You can see as well strikes on these ships, multiple of these these drones lining up to then attack the ship, you know, in a combined assault onto here, as well as, you know, fighting from the deck. And we can see what does look like soldiers out on the bridge here in thermal, and they will be trying to engage these with everything from small arms to arms on the ship as well. Now, you may remember from a video I talked a while back, it must have been 9 months back, but I spoke like offline, but with a Navy officer, Australian Navy officer, about what like countermeasure do we actually have for this? And like realistically, not much. Shooting at it with guns, trying to detect it in the water. And the best way would be if we can detect it well out from the ship and deploy like a helicopter or something to then take it out. Or going into open ocean, or using the ship's, you know, high speed, because these ships are very quick, you know, on the move to get away. But surprise attack like this, the actual countermeasures aren't that great. Now, we're going to skip forward in this video, but we can see then these major hits on the ship here. So, cameraman always lives. So that is one of the big impacts on this ship here. And then I'll put this full video in the Telegram if you'd like to watch, but you can see more of these then going into the ship. And then at the end, we will then see the ship that is then sinking. So you can see it listing over. And then there goes one of the Rapucha class landing ships. Now, BBC has reported also a former sailor who served on board the Caesar Konikov told BBC that all the crew, of which there were 89 members, had succeeded in leaving the sinking ship in time. So because these take multiple strikes, they may have been able to get off with then the lifeboats or get off the boat from there. But this ship has actually been attacked before in March 2022. So this is the Black Sea Fleet, how it is standing currently. Now, in this, we can see this small V here meant that this was damaged, and this is the ship that has then been taken out. As you can see, this one has also been damaged. This one, I believe, was damaged on the same day as the one today, leaving 5 landing ships in the Black Sea currently. Now, why is this really important to the war? Now, there's two big reasons why. Let's just start with the minor one. This is important for Ukraine for propaganda, to show Ukraine's capability of taking out multi-million-dollar Russian warships. And people say, oh, it's a warship from back in the 80s. It's a land war. It doesn't matter. That matters, especially when Ukraine's had a lot of bad press recently. They've got what's going on in Avdiivka. That morale, propaganda, informational tool, that means a hell of a lot. And to actually show that capability and where Russia may think twice about moving its battleships around. But that's the lesser. The main bit is denying Russia landing amphibious capability. If Russia want to strategically win this war, they need to hold in here of Odessa and line up to where they control then in Moldova. I can't see any way of Russia strategically winning this without here in Odessa, because we know somewhere down along here is where then these Magura V5 or other Sea Baby drones, whatever, are being launched. We know, you know, pretty much they're coming across somewhere from down here. The Russia need to land across here. Realistically, your options to do this, you don't have airborne. That's just a suicide mission. I think that an amphibious mission is suicide as well. But if they can get some sort of blockade initially and then land more troops and armor and whatever with amphibious, maybe, but it does limit that. So, you know, now that they're down to half of their landing ships, I believe those landing ships are probably some of the most important ships for Russia in the Black Sea. So this is why it's very important for Ukraine to be striking those ships. So that is, I guess, a quick overview of at least how I see it. This does bring into question, though, as well, why, you know, the Kerch Bridge isn't getting more attacked by the capability of these. There hasn't really been a real serious push other than a few missiles to then hinder supply into Russia's south here. We thought for sure that was going to kick off the Ukrainian counteroffensive last year, and it hasn't. Maybe we'll see the Kerch Bridge be, you know, attacked by missiles and these drones somewhat soon. But I do want to also talk about that Russia can resupply these ships. They don't have to sit in the Sea of Azov or in the Black Sea either. That Russia has the unified deep water system throughout Russia. Now we see this is the Black Sea, this is Crimea down here, this is Sea of Azov, and it runs basically from here right up into northern Russia. And this can move everything from warships to submarines in some channels. It does definitely go up and down in how deep things can go. But if we do see, if you have a look on Google Maps through Rostov-on-Don, I don't have that open, but you can see cargo ships moving through. So these ships can move forward and back, in and out for repair, and move more ships down if needed. Now, this is, you need to remember, the Russian Navy is still very large and very powerful. Now, I've got this next to the aircraft carrier because, yeah, not really. It's pretty fucked, apparently. But they still have a hell of a lot of ships and could potentially move them around inside the country as well with the unified deep water system. So, yes, the Black Sea Fleet is really getting picked apart. Still have a hell of a lot of stuff here, and Ukraine will really try and target that. But this isn't not like a 50% naval defeat of the Russian forces. And Ukraine striking a navy, even though it's a land war, is still incredibly important. And as far as what is the best method to go to countering these, we don't really have one yet. EW, machine guns, seeing them in the water. That's currently about it. But everyone hating on Elon Musk, we know that these work straight off the Starlink as well. If Elon Musk was, like some people like Dennis will try and say, a Putin sympathizer, well, I don't think his company would be letting your drones and other pieces of equipment do just this. Now, speaking of Putin up in the Kremlin, he's come out with some interesting stuff today, and I have a bit of a take on this. So this comes from Associated Press, but this is from Russian state television, that President Putin said on Wednesday that he would prefer to see President Joe Biden win a second term, saying Biden, he's more experienced and more predictable. He's a politician of the old formation, but we will work with any US leader whom the American people trust. And I won't disagree that he is more predictable than Trump. This is probably why we saw Russia not invade over Trump's term. Trump is unpredictable. Trump is at the moment saying we'll end this war, but we don't know what Trump would have done if Putin launched that invasion back then. I think, realistically, he's waiting for Trump to get out of power to then launch this. As well, we know that if you read anything old KGB, then turned into FSB, you know that the Russian intelligence actually like to lean on the liberal side of things to create more division amongst then Christians in America, right-wing conservatives in America. That's where they actually like to lean a lot of their intelligence network on sort of the left of it. So that may work more in line with the intelligence services under that as well. Now, about speculation of Biden's health issues, Putin responded, "I'm not a doctor and I don't consider it proper to comment that." But when they met in Switzerland 2021, adding that he witnessed the contrary and saw the US leader in good shape. They talked about him being incapacitated, but I saw nothing of the kind. I've seen some of that kind. Yes, he was peeking at his papers. To be honest, I was peeking at mine. Not a big deal. But at the same time, he noted the Biden administration policy is wrong. Speaking, of course, of how America has then supported the war. So I think that is interesting to look at as well. Now, we're going to get onto the last pieces of the maps. I am sorry. So, of course, Avdiivka is here. Just going to move up into Bakhmut. Now, I will say that Deep State map doesn't actually have any update anywhere else, but we have Syriac. And this does line up, a day or two out sometimes, but it does line up. So we know right here is Ivanovsky, and this is where Russia is trying to push from the north and from the west, saying that Russian army improved the area of control in the road between Bakhmut and Ivanovsky, taking control, over the first trenches just at the outskirts of the town. The capture of the northern and eastern trenches in the road will be essential in order to move the front line to Ivanovsky. So just making a little bit more ground up this road. And we did see on the Deep State map this jump from this other road of life through Komove towards Ivanovsky yesterday as well. Now we're going to move right up into the northeastern corner into Sinkivka. Of course, trying to capture Kupiansk up here. No change on this map for a couple of days, but this map is showing that Russia has increased its control just to the west of Sinkivka. So we see this paddock. It's saying that just this paddock here has been taken by the Russian forces. Let's look at what he says. On the northeastern front, clashes between Ukrainian army and Russian army continue around Thankyou without significant change during the last 3 days. Russian troops advanced some 100 of meters on the northeastern outskirts of the village, but were unable to reach the first buildings from the axis. So maybe moved up to here, but still unable to reach it. And we have seen that Russia has launched multiple attacks down along these axes into here, and have been taken out by FPV drones and troops within Thankyou as well. This area is a very, very hard place to both defend and have offensive actions for the amount of fire from far away built up areas as well. Now, one last thing that I wanted to go over in my folder called It Must Be AI. The Liberty of Russian Legion has then released this. Now, of course, Liberty of Russian Legion say that they are either Russian troops who have defected into Ukraine or foreigners to then fight against Russia to what they say free Russians of the Kremlin. Saying not so long ago, supporters of terrorist Putin believed that they would not have to pay for anything. They rejoiced at the annexation of Crimea, the massacre in Bucha, and the destruction of Mariupol, the occupation of Kherson, and the daily shelling of Kharkiv. They wished peaceful Ukrainians to die during the bombings. But everything has its end, and soon it will be the turn of the terrorist Kremlin regime. Responsibility we declare. For every blow to on Kharkiv, we, the Legion Liberty of Russia, will strike on Belgorod. Of course, this is in Russian territory, just to the north of Kharkiv. Trophy equipment captured by us from Putin's under army will allow us to surprise his supporters more than once it's time to pay the bill. So we have seen Western equipment in the hands of these Liberty of Russian legions. That's interesting because no Western equipment is meant to be used inside Russia. The loophole that they've found in this is they say, no, this was taken by Russia. Say this M4 or say this Humvee was taken by Russia. We've taken it back as a trophy and now we're crossing back over into there. I know, right? Just go with me. We are striking with all weapons available to us today exclusively against the military facilities in Putin's under army. But as you know yourself, know very well, these facilities are almost always located in the midst of civilian buildings, like all facilities in this war. Cowards always put up a human shield of innocent people in front of them. Therefore, we advise all our supporters to leave Belgrade and the region and stay from military infrastructure. It will be hot there very soon, so promising a cross into the north. But now, it is this small evil by destroying military equipment and military facilities of Putin's Russia. We do not let a greater evil, greater deaths be born. Only liquidation can stop the regime and its supporters understanding only brute force. Of course, with then a drone here and this flag that they've made up saying that they are, this legion to free Russia. Now, the video is on the Telegram if you'd like to watch the full thing, but it isn't translated. I'm trying to find some translation. But right in the start here at 9 seconds, of course, we see then the M4 there, putting together the drone, and then this, which is interesting because this is then the black sun symbol of the Nazis employed by the SS with their logos as well. And we've probably seen this some places here before, although you're not allowed to talk about that because apparently it doesn't exist because everyone's turned a blind eye to this. We know the leaders of Freedom of Russian Legion and the Liberty of Russian Legion have had some interesting passes before in Europe. So it will be interesting to see what exactly these guys then launch across the border. So we're talking Belgorod up here that we have seen these crosses happen previously. Don't know how that will actually then go and who on the back channels is actually supporting this. We never know. Anyway, legends. Sorry this one was longer, but we did have a fair bit to go over and I kept stumbling on the word, so it's cut. But look after yourselves and yeah, I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.